Charles is a author, sommelier, and one of our many choices for reading about wine. Now, welcome, Charles. Charles.
Hey, Miranda, how you doing?
Hey, Charles. How are you doing on this Wine Wednesday?
Good, good. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you as well. For those of you watching, Charles and I have met a few different times. He's hosted many events virtually that I've taken a part of. I Drink Pink just recently. So we've never met in person, but I like to think of us as Prosecco pen pals.
I like it.
So if you have a question for Charles, please share and we'll get it to him. But me first. Charles, you are obviously a fan of rosé. So tell me, how did you become to enjoy this lovely pink drink?
I think it's, thanks. Well, first of all, Miranda, I want to say thanks for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you and so excited you chose me for this conversation. But I think when I think about it, I always loved wine when I was a youngster, probably too young to drink wine, especially in the United States. But I think I really got into pink wine when I was in college. And I used to call myself a little bit like broke and bougie. I used to throw house parties. And I used to buy these box wines. Of course, the White Zinfandel, and then the Merlot, and then the Chablis. And then so entertained. And that was my kind of way of being sophisticated in college. But I think what drew me to rosé was just the color and just like the taste of it. It's just like so unique. Of course, it's part of the three major wine categories, but the flavor profiles are just so unique and something that I really responded to.
Yes, we share that love of rosé. I actually kind of want to blame you for my obsession with it because you have been celebrating rosé this entire month. And I have definitely taken part of that celebration, okay? What are you drinking tonight?
Well, I'm actually, I'm drinking a little bit something from your area. My lights are kind of bright, but we have Grape from New Mexico.
Yes!
So wow. It's the sparkling rosé. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're on there.
Oh, well, so I have... that is amazing. Thank you for bringing a little New Mexico to New York. Okay, that is amazing. That's where we're filming live from, New Mexico. And I decided, because you are such a huge fan of rosé, I was like, what do I have that would be something that Charles would enjoy, right? Like as if I was going to pour you a glass with me tonight. So I dug deep, and I'm actually drinking this wine in honor of Jim Clendenin. It is a Mongoose rosé. How about that?
Wow, that is impressive. And it's so pretty too in color.
Right, yeah. Look at this beautiful color. So it was planted in Pienecito, so that's a Santa Barbara County wine country there. And it's from the Savoy region of France, like bordering Switzerland. And there is a peppery red grape, but it translates into a beautiful rosé. It does have some of that like leftover spiciness, but it's actually so good with food or just a view.
Nice, very cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, cheers to us.
Cheers to us and rosé. Yes.
Yes, cheers to us and rosé. Oh, yeah, that is so good.
Yeah, you got to drink. It's bad luck.
Yeah, I got to drink my rosé. Okay, Charles. So I have been holding on to these questions, collecting questions from wine book club members, and I think we'll start off with the book club members' questions first.
Okay.
One of our book club members wants to know what is the difference between rosé and orange wine?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. And sometimes people get them a little bit confused because they can look alike in color sometimes. So when you think about rosé wines are made from any red skin grapes for the most part. So red skin grapes like a Pinot Noir, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon. And still, so there's a limited pressing for the most part, which you press for a couple hours, maybe anywhere between 2 to maybe 72 hours to press the red skin grapes. for that short amount of time, and you get a pink color to the wine. So that differs between orange wines, because orange wines are actually made from white skin grapes, the white wine grapes, like a Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio, where the same kind of process is made. When you make a traditional white wine, the skins are removed from the process, so there's no skin contact. But orange wines are skin contact white wine, so you have skin contact with the juice anywhere between 2 hours to usually like sometimes 6 months, and so you get an orange, copper, kind of golden color. So in this, they're like the equivalent of a red skin grape and a white skin grape, the same process but different colors. And orange wine just became the term, I think, in 2004, where a reporter deemed it that color because they wanted to kind of fit in with the red, white, pink, and orange category. So that's why orange traditionally is called amber wine.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah. Okay, to the club members listening, if you still have a question for Charles, feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll get it to him, okay? But you mentioned how they were trying to fit it in the styles of wine. Do you think there's a better way for us to classify wine rather than just white, red, rosé, and orange?
I mean, I think it's probably easiest for now. Like, I mean, I'm not sure how the, we don't have a white wine. It doesn't look like milk, but I mean, I would change that if I could. But I would probably do yellow, red, orange, and pink. But I think that's the easiest way to kind of describe it for now, and to keep, keep things, I guess, easy to understand. Keep it simple. But I think it works for now. Yeah.
I think when it comes to wine, it is important to keep it more casual, especially nowadays, considering so many different trends. For example, notice my screw cap top. Remember when this was just totally like, oh no, you're drinking screw cap wine, and it was just like, I would say like it was like a kind of like a bad word almost for wine. Do you think people are seeing canned wine in the same light as it? Do you think people are seeing it good or in a bad way?
Yeah, I think it's weird because I think people they take wine so personally, so it's very personal to an individual, and so we become somewhat of a traditionalist, even though we only have a small fraction of the tradition of the wine from thousands of years. But that whatever fraction or piece we have, we cling tight to it. So if you go to a restaurant, you want your wine to come with a cork and do the whole pomp and circumstance, so the opening and things like that. If you see a screw cap, you think it might be cheap or inferior, those kind of things. And these kind of stereotypes and misnomers kind of float around and kind of populate our minds and our culture. But I still see a lot of pushback when it comes to screw caps. But I hope that's changing. And then I think when it comes to wine, especially wine in cans and wine in boxes, I think people have to keep an open mind, because just like our music, has changed. I'm a child of the 70s, so we went from 8-tracks to records to tapes and CDs and, all kinds of stuff. Now digital music, we have to do the same thing with wine. We can't always stay in the same kind of box. No pun intended.
Charles, put a record on for me, okay? So it looks like we have our very first question. Ladies' wine nights. How do the different yeast impact the flavors? Are there traditional red wine, white wine, and rosé yeasts? Thank you, ladies' wine night. Charles?
Yeah, so when it comes to yeast, the way I talk about yeast for the most part is native yeast. So everywhere in the environment there's yeast, and so in the vineyard and the farm, the yeast lands on the skins, and that is when the yeast on the skins interact with the sugar and the juice that ferments the wine. So that's the more natural process, because wine can make itself. If you have grapes from the grocery store and you keep them in the fridge too long and you have a little hole, the yeast will start to eat the sugar and ferment that grape into, it'll have alcohol in it after a while. But there are some times when winemakers will add cultivated yeast, and it's almost like baker's or brewer's yeast. So those are the main two yeast you can use to ferment a grape. So sometimes those yeast will add flavor to the wine, or like sometimes if you drink wine and you find it says sur lie, or it has like on the lees or on the yeast. So there's yeast to give wine flavoring. So the same thing with cultivated yeast does that as well, depending on what the winemaker wants to do. But it's not a yeast for red, white, or rosé. It's just one basic style of yeast, but it will impact the flavor. And there's also some yeast. Usually when the alcohol hits around 12, 13, 14%, native yeast kind of dies off. So sometimes you need a cultivated yeast that can stand a little bit higher alcohol. Sometimes that fermentation needs to spread out a little bit longer for wines to be 14, 15, 16% alcohol. So, yeah.
Wow. Thank you for that excellent answer. Oh, next time I go to a brewery, I'm going to ask for a beer with champagne yeast. Let's see what they come up with, okay? Like, go in the back, find me one. So, you know what's another realm of yeast that people are constantly talking about? And you just recently were on Wine Enthusiast podcast trying to decipher the natural wine. So, do you think me and you can define natural wine right now?
I mean, I think it's, I try to keep things simple. So, natural wine for me is low intervention wine and wine that's made in the most organic way possible. That's the best way I can sum it up. But of course, there's all these kind of, like we talked about the categories of white, red, pink, and orange. That's simple. But we throw all these different terms into the mix and it gets really confusing, like clean wine, dry farmed wine, low sulfite wines, and then you talk about the different farming practices like organic, biodynamic, sustainable. Then it gets a little bit confusing. But again, what I say natural wine is low intervention wine where the winemaker doesn't really manipulate the wine so much. It kind of lets it do its thing, and then so that's little to no additives to it, and then also organic farming for the most. As much as possible. So no chemical herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, and things like that.
Wow. Thank you, Charles. I'm going to go off that and add to your definition. I've always thought of natural wine as a design. So it starts off with a native ferment, right? And then move on to independent growers / producers and just kind of like hand-picked grapes. In my mind, that's what natural wine is.
Yeah. So, and of course, there are larger producers and there's more artisanal producers. Some larger producers, they can't really do a lot of hand picking because it's just too much area to cover. And then the small producers can definitely do that. And then some producers actually go as far as not having any kind of machinery or like tractors or trucks on the vineyards. They want to kind of keep it like sometimes you find horses or, to help them cultivate or kind of aerate the land and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to describe it, but, in the simple terms, you just want to, I think my whole thing is like making it kind of simple. So, low intervention or low intervention because you have to have some kind of intervention. Otherwise, it's just like throwing grapes in a bucket and let it ferment. And that's probably how wine started in the first place. Like no intervention, it just like did what it did. And then organic, we want to stay away from the chemicals. There is this big concern about what are we ingesting in our bodies from our beverages and food and things like that, and a lot of pushback from our industrial agriculture, the system that kind of hit the world after World War II. So we've kind of polluted these lands, vineyards and also farmland with chemicals. Now we have to reinvigorate the land with biodiversity and recreate this new more organic farming where land is aerated, and we have now this biodiversity of worms and things that kind of help fulfill these vineyards. So so I think that's a big push. And every time I talk to a winemaker, especially in France, they're talking about weaning themselves off of chemicals, and then they think that's definitely the wave of the future. They think all wines will be organic or biodynamic at some point in the near future.
Oh, I want to know. Send me a list of those winemakers because I would be interested, because they're taking the conscious choice to move away from it, even though money, right? They might lose money on something like that. So I really appreciate winemakers, vineyard workers. All of us should be working together to try to not only preserve what we have, but make something better. Make it better, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it looks like we have a question from the audience. Has Charles ever savored wine? Uh-oh, Charles!
I have. I have a YouTube channel, so it's kind of, I hadn't worked on it for years, but when I was doing content consistently for 6 months, and when I hit my 6-month mark, I actually savored a bottle, and it's on camera on my YouTube channel. It was in my apartment. It got a little messy, but and I've also savored, with some friends. Sometimes my wine friends will finish a long day, and we'll have some champagne after work, and then the knives come out and the savoring happens. So
Oh yeah. So when I usually pick up a glass of like a bottle of wine, I always look for the seam on it. I've never taken a knife to it, but I always notice it. I'm always like, so that's, if I was gonna do it, that's where I have the blunt force, right, to like make it like pop off. I've seen so many saborings like fail videos, and they're hilarious.
I mean, it can go horribly wrong, so you have to be careful. And some people do it really tricky. Sometimes they do it with the bottom of a wine glass or something unique. But I stick with the traditional knife. I'm not brave enough to try anything like else.
Oh, wine glass? Wow, I have to look that up. That is intense. So, considering you are not only the author of The Less is More Approach to Wine, and you have also written Maneuvering Rosé Wine with Style, how is the process of writing?
Yeah, so I think the process for writing a long form book it's tricky. You have to be very organized. I started off with a lot of like outlines, and so I started off with like a table of contents that I wanted to kind of cover, topics that I wanted to cover in my table of contents, just as an outline, and then try to fill in the blanks, and then just kind of really think about what kind of book I wanted to write. Like, why did I want to write this book? What void would it fill in the market? What did I want to say? Did I have anything to say, that's worthy of spending 9 months to a year on a book? So it's a lot of thought that goes into it, and then also a lot of thought when it comes to actually writing, because you need a free kind of mind space to let your mind be creative and wander, and not be burdened with every single detail that's going on, in everybody's life or in the world. Sometimes that's why a lot of people sometimes go to a cabin and just kind of shut themselves off from the world and just focus. So you do need some quiet time and inspiration. So sometimes, like when I felt like I had a little bit of writer's block, and just as a background, I'm a former newspaper reporter. So for years I was writing daily newspaper content, several stories a day for 5 days a week for the most part. So that was quick, and that was years ago. So I had to get back in the habit of writing. So sometimes I would, make myself a little picnic with some cheese and grapes and fruits or whatever, and crackers, and of course some canned wine on ice, and then take myself to the park, sit on a bench, and just try to write my notes out and just kind of see what moved me and what inspired me, because I wanted my books, both of the books, to feel like me, sound like me, and be very different from any other books that you find on the market, to make it kind of stand out a bit.
Mm-hmm. And having read your book, I love your voice. First of all, it's entirely relatable. You mentioned Oprah, you mentioned Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, you mentioned Cheers. I mean, I was like, oh, I know that. It was such a delight to read, really. And having to be able to follow along with a group of people who are also interested was probably one of the best learning experiences in regards to wine that I've had during COVID.
Oh wow, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I've been teaching wine classes, been in the wine business for now 11 years, and I know that, sometimes you go to a wine class and there's all this technical stuff and your eyes glaze over and you're like, what is he talking about? So I wanted to make it fun. I wanted to make it relatable and, because wine it should be fun. It should, it is complex and complicated, but you can also have fun with it and boil it down to some fun text in a book. So I'm glad you were able to have some fun, and I'm glad I was able to educate you in a fun way during COVID, because we definitely needed some fun during COVID. So.
Oh, yes, it was delightful. I'm speaking for everyone in that. It was so much fun to read.
Oh,
and
good.
It looks like we have actually another question from the audience for Charles. Do you prefer New World or Old World wines, and why?
Well, it's interesting. I'm a fan of both, I think, but I mean, at the heart of my wine love, I'm a kind of Francophile, so I always grew up, ever since I can remember, a big fan of France, and when it comes to the wine regions in France, I can find something really lovely to drink in every region that produces wine in France. So I'm a big French wine fan. So I can't say that about every other country, but there is something really special about the New World wines. I love innovation. So I think even personally, I'm a mix of two. So I have that French, love of France, and but also, I'm always trying to push myself and push the envelope for myself. So I think personally, I'm a bit of old world and new world. But I find something to really enjoy in both styles, and it's such a wide wine world, So I love like Pinot Noir from Burgundy, but I also love Pinotage from South Africa. It's kind of hard to compare the two. So I just love it all. That may make me sound like a lush, but I just love it all.
Believe me, you're in good company. Okay. I think when it comes to, I don't think it's fair to pick a team. It's like I want to be on Team New World and on Team Old World on the weekends, right? Like.
It's funny, I was watching this new documentary. I think it's called Seat at the Table, about New Zealand winemakers. Do they actually have a seat at the table? Are they getting respect from the wine world? And it's interesting because a lot of French winemakers are actually going to New Zealand to learn some of their techniques because they're really impressed. So I think both worlds work with each other to really kind of feed off each other and grow. So I think that's the beauty of the wine world, to have two distinct styles or regions and philosophies, then they meld together in some points to grow and learn and prosper from each other too.
Yeah, and I think life is too short to just stick to one lane. You gotta take an exit, right, and just try different things, because I would have never known about Mongoose or Aligote or any other wine that you've seen and you can't pronounce. How are you going to be able to understand it if you didn't try it? So my saying is, try it once, try it twice to be sure.
Yeah, that's good. That's good philosophy for sure.
Oh, it looks like we have another question from the audience. All right. What determines whether two grape varieties would make a good blend? Ooh, great question.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. The winemakers, they're almost like these amazing artists and scientists, because they know their land, they know their grapes, and they know the flavor profiles as they go around and taste the wines during the growing season, and so they get to understand it's almost like a chef, except it goes like to another level when they blend. So they know what grapes will complement each other, and then when they taste around the finished product and they start to make their blends, they understand what ratios would work better. If they do, say for instance, 25% of one and 75% of another, they're like, well, that's a little bit off. Maybe we should do it more 50-50 or something like that, or even reverse the ratios. So I liken them to like amazing artists and scientists, but also almost like a chef. You have your ingredients at your arsenal, or at your at your fingertips, and you can kind of play around with things and figure out what's going to be the best flavor and the ideal wine that you want to make at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to blends, the one I see most common is Grenache, Syrah, and Mourvedre. Why is that?
In this, it comes from the southern Rhone Valley, where those are the grapes that have been kind of primarily been grown there since after phylloxera, after the late 1800s. And when phylloxera got fixed, those were the grapes that ended up being in that particular region. So, they grow so many different grape varietals in the southern Rhone Valley. It's like, why not use them all? Instead of just making individual grape varieties like a Grenache or Syrah, which they do, like in northern Rhone Valley, they make 100% Syrah, or even like in northern Rhone, they'll blend a little Viognier, a little white wine with the Syrah to give a little bit more aromatics. But all that stuff from Europe and the old world has been through trial and error, and so they know kind of what works together. Some grapes ripen earlier, so they're a little more fruit forward, and then some are late ripening grapes, so they might be a little bit tart, and so that kind of affects the ratios and blends too. So it's a really unique way of operating. I haven't seen winemakers do that in person. I've only seen them doing it in movies and things like that, in documentaries. But I would love to be a part of that blending session, one at once somewhere, and see how the magic happens.
Oh yeah, there's nothing like going into a winery and looking at all the barrels, looking at all the equipment, and just thinking like, wow, it went through all of that just to get into this glass.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely shows all the craftsmanship that go into making wine, selling wine, producing wine. So thank you for answering that question.
Of course.
And in regards to actually making wine, have you ever considered dabbling?
I get tempted at the thought, of having my name or my stamp on a wine. I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot.
It is a lot. It is so much. I have a recipe book for 1 gallon worth of wine, right? Because I'm like, I gotta see if I can do it small scale first. So I'll let you know when harvest comes around how that is going. I'll keep you posted on my progress.
Yeah, you gotta keep me posted. Yeah, but that's just like 1 gallon. Just think about if you had like a few acres, or even just like bought a bunch of grapes and had this entire winery to produce something. That's a big endeavor. So who knows? What'll happen? But I say never say never. So
yes, never say never. I was inspired by a friend who's actually on your part of town, New York, but closer to the Finger Lakes, and they're actually trying to start the venture up. So the Finger Lakes is a region in New York. Does New York have other wine regions?
Yeah, we have. So the Finger Lakes is northern, like upstate New York, so close to Canada border and things like that. Niagara area, surrounded by those lakes that look like fingers. That's why it's called Finger Lakes, of course. But then we have closer to me, we have the Hudson Valley, which is a little bit north of Manhattan, and then we have Long Island. So we have a bunch of Long Island wineries, some famous ones in the Hamptons. So those are the 3 major regions: Finger Lakes, Hudson Valley, and Long Island. And then it's interesting because we have in New York City, we have a lot of urban wineries too. So we have a couple wineries in Brooklyn that source their grapes and make it in their winery facilities in Brooklyn. And we have, of course, like City Winery is very popular. We have a City Winery here, so you can make wine, private label with a group of friends and stuff like that, and have your, maybe a year later pick it up and have, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of opportunities to enjoy some interesting wines, and then do it from a full out perspective, like maybe what your friends are going to do, like this big endeavor, or just do a winery kind of situation. So.
Well, I said, if you need helping hands, I will work for wine.
Yeah, and then you get to come to visit New York, and then and sample us with some of your creations.
Well, I've always been curious about the New York wine scene. I got to actually check out one of your interviews with an old coworker, Carrie.
Yeah.
Right.
Carrie.
Varieties. And you were talking about how it was working in New York at a wine shop back when this, like, I guess this kind of wasn't that popular, right? Can you expand a little more, or maybe share a story of what it was like to work and like sell wine at a bottle shop before you became an author?
Yeah, it was funny. Like this, it's like some kind of happy accident. It's like this serendipitous kismet kind of thing where all of us, like at least like a handful of us, 5 or 6 of us that we still keep in touch with today. We all were doing our own things. Like at that point I was a PR person. Started my own small shop. I just left my full-time job and moved to New York to do that and step on my own and figure things out. We had people who had worked in the film industry and all kinds and cooking and all kinds of stuff. And so and everybody like had college degrees, even though they only paid us like $12 an hour. 2010. I think sometimes they still pay that much in wine shops, but we weren't making a lot of money. But the best thing we had was each other. It was like almost like a sitcom, like Friends or Cheers or like Living Single. Like we all became really good friends, and then who knew that one shop would inspire a lot of us to continue on, our wine journeys, and me become a certified sommelier and author, and do a lot of wine classes, and Carrie, she went to work for Wine Enthusiast and became a wine writer, and now international wine judge and things like that. So yeah, it was just like this really interesting hotbed, what do you call it? It was just that this moment just kind of brought us together, and then it was just amazing. I can't even really describe it because it was so, I don't know. So the universal forces just made it all work.
Yeah, I can see that. It's very easy to get inspired in New York as well. I visited maybe once, and it's like the city makes you want to run around and try new things and explore what it has to offer. So I can see that. I can definitely see that.
Yeah, plus the rent is very high too, so we have to have several hustles and side hustles. so that job was like a part-time job for me, and a lot of us, we all had a couple different things, irons in the fire. But it was one of the best times and the best entry to New York, because I had just moved to New York at that year. So yeah.
Speaking of irons in the fire, you just recently inked a deal. Am I correct? Can you expand a little more on this deal that you've just recently signed?
So I was approached by a new streaming service that's found currently on Roku and Fire Stick. That's a new network that was starting. It launched in March, I believe. But I was contacted earlier this year to see if I would be interested in being executive producer and host of my own wine show. So I had been. It's like one of those kismet things. I've been thinking about wine, a wine show, because I actually have I have a degree in journalism. I talked about my print background, but when I was in college, I also studied broadcast. So it's always kind of been in my blood, and I've done it, like at least school wise. And then of course my little YouTube stuff and my IG lives. But I thought it was a great opportunity to tell my story in a more visual way, and then really and show it from a different lens. There's not a lot of wine shows out there, and there's definitely not a lot of wine shows that are led by a team of African American writers and producers and things like that, or a host. So I was excited. So I'm in the process of working on the pilot. I have the idea kind of already written up. I just need to kind of get it produced and get all my special guests lined up. Most of them are really lined up already, and then go film it. So then if that goes well, then we can get picked up for a 10 episode season. So yeah.
Charles, cheers to you. Wow, that is absolutely amazing. If you're watching this at home, please raise your glass for Charles, okay?
Thank you.
Yes. Now, let's talk about your Monday meditations with wine. You started that this year during COVID. How has it changed since when you first started?
So when I first started, I wanted to start it for a couple different reasons. I think when I go into book writing, it's a very solitary process, and I'm kind of away from social media. So I'm not doing a lot of self promotion, or I'm not out there so much. So even sometimes opportunities that may come along, they pass me by because I'm not on social media or whatever. So I wanted to do it for two reasons: to connect better with people this year, since I'm not writing a book this year or the next year. And then also, I used to make these long New Year's resolutions. Like they used to be sometimes when I was a teenager, like 2 pages, and there's no way you can ever get through that stuff in 1 year. 2 pages of resolutions. And so I decided to just do one resolution, and my resolution for 2021 was consistency, to be consistent. And I said, if I can do one thing consistently on a regular basis and have some kind of check system where people are looking for it, or but people is going to make me do it. So I started the IG live on Mondays and said, I do this at least for a year. Every week is, if I can, sometimes I can take a week off, but I wanted to be very consistent in something. And I feel like if you can be consistent in that one small thing, that'll spill over to the rest of my life. And I think when it comes to being successful, consistency is a big part of that, and keeping your word and doing what you need to do. And also, like, it's a lot of fun too. I was a little nervous because it was a lot of content to do, a lot of people to interview and contact, but then it slowly started to, and my first guest was one of my best friends for like 20 plus years. So that was easy to do. And then it just became fun, and then people started really liking it. And I would get calls or texts after the interviews and said, wow, that was really fun. I had a good time talking to you. I love the way you, chat and listen even. So, it's just nice. It's been a nice way to connect with people over the last few months.
If you're watching at home and you're wondering about Monday Meditations with Charles, he hosts them on Mondays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. As you can see, I have obviously enjoyed not only tuning in, but jumping on. Yeah. Charles, thank you so much for having me.
And of course, we have a good time. We're look at us. We're just having the best time. Laughing and just catching up. And again, just thanks for all your support. It's been really, really lovely and sweet. So I really do appreciate that.
No, Charles, you are a part of the inspiration to help me put this together. I attended the International Winemaker Summit last February, and you were moderating such a lively discussion, and everyone was talking about books, and it just happened. And then I was motivated to start Entirely Wine Focused Book Club, and I can owe a lot of that to you for always being so professional, so fun, so free, making wine approachable.
No, thank you. It's funny because when I'm doing this session, I have like papers and notes and writing down stuff and all that kind of jazz. And then of course I can't see a lot of the comments. And so I heard, it was a lively discussion. I thought, and then people had a great time, and I was just like having fun. I was trying to be a little bit silly, and the guys' energy, we just kind of, vibed off each other, and then talked about some more topical stuff and try to be real and just try to be human with each other. And I think that's the best way to kind of like do something like this. It's just be honest and real in yourself, and just enjoy the whole process.
Yeah, because I feel like language can be actually sometimes a barrier when it comes to wine.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times, if you don't speak different languages, and sometimes it's hard to pronounce different things like Sangiovese or like Chateauneuf-du-Pape or whatever. It's just like, but I think like if you travel internationally, if you at least make an attempt to get the words right or whatever, then I think people respect that. I don't always get the words right. Sometimes I'm like, what? I remember one time I had a bottle of Chasselas from Albert Boxer, and I was like, it was really fast and it was in class, and I said "Shasalasa" or something like that. And I was like, "What did I just say?" So yeah,
I think we've all encountered that one bottle that it's like what? What is that even? Gewürztraminer? I remember seeing Gewürztraminer being like, I don't feel comfortable saying it out loud.
exactly.
When I tell people I like wine, sometimes I mean most people are energized by it, but then sometimes you get the occasional person who says, "So you like licking rocks?" Do you think the way we describe wine can be put in a more layman's, like everyday language?
Yes, I definitely do. I think it's we want to connect with people, and everybody's not a scientist um, or thinking about these things in those kind of ways, like minerals and pH balance and levels and things like that. So I never like really talk about that. I remember I had a doctor came into one of my classes and he was asking the pH of a wine, and I was like, well, I don't really know. I haven't researched the pH because I don't really get that question, and I don't think a lot of people would really understand the pH chart just if I just throw out a number, because it's kind of it's like counterintuitive, the chart. But yeah, so like I think if you say like when I say when people ask about minerality, like licking rocks and things like that, I just tell them, I said, if you've been to a lake or swimming in or by a brook or a pond and you smell the freshness of wet rocks, that's what kind of minerality it tastes like. We do about 80% of what we taste is through our nose. So you don't have to go licking on rocks, but you can smell those wet rocks and understand what that tastes like. Or if it's like a really pristine, if you're in the woods somewhere or like somewhere more pristine and it rains, and you get that really heavy rain and you smell the earth. That's kind of what minerality and earthiness can smell like. But again, you don't have to go putting that dirt in your mouth to understand what some wines taste like when it comes to very earthy things. So. And even just being silly about it, just making people giggle and like, oh, okay, I never thought about it that way. So, yeah, but I think some people want to be more highbrow than it has to be, and I think we should just try to speak to each other and not at each other.
Yes, let's speak to each other, not at each other, because I love a good funky wine, right? Like something with a little more. I guess I'm going to use one of the words. I was going to use like fresh forest floor, but really just like baby poop. That's what it smells like sometimes. But it doesn't mean that the wine itself, right? I think people are associating the smells a little like with like the taste, but like that is actually a good descriptor, believe it or not.
Yeah. I think people get very literal. Sometimes. I was in a class one day and I said, this sparkling wine, like say for instance, the Gouet that I'm drinking has hints of strawberry. And then one person raised their hand and like, I'm allergic to strawberries. There's no strawberries in this wine, right? And I'm like, no, there's no strawberries in this wine. It's just the essence or hints of it that, if you smell it, it may remind you of strawberries or something like that, but there's no strawberries in the making of this wine. So.
Yeah. So what's it like teaching a class? I saw recently that you actually hosted a chocolate pairing and you recommended people use salty chips to cleanse their palate.
Yeah, I think, I do that for a couple different reasons because I love chocolate and something salty like chips and like pretzels, like salty pretzels and chocolate. Or chocolate covered pretzels. I can do a whole class with that. That'll be fun too. But I think like when you have some really rich chocolates, and we do like 6 different chocolates, you need something to kind of instead of water, you need something to really kind of reset your palate. And then I give them prosecco and chips at the beginning, just kind of like whet their palate and whet their appetite. But the chips serve as a palate cleanser, especially because they had salt and vinegar chips. So it kind of really takes away the flavor from the previous chocolate on their palate, and then it gets them ready for the next chocolate. So.
Wow. And are you hosting these virtually, or can people sign up to do an in-person tasting with you as well?
Yeah, so I'm doing, usually I haven't gone back into like teaching my public classes. I'm still kind of waiting on that a bit, but I do have private clients, and this was a private client. I service a couple of buildings in Manhattan, so I sometimes do events for the residents. and so that was a more like a resident event. And I'm on the fence about going back to some of the in-person classes. I love to do them, but I may spread them out some more. I used to do them every week. At one time, I used to do, sometimes I did like 5 or 6 a week. But I've learned a lot about over this last year about the benefits of social media and even online platforms like this, like StreamYard and Zoom. And so I want to do some things to reach people that I haven't been able to reach, outside of New York. So I want to keep my wine classes and wine programs here, but then also expand it to other people and places, so I can interact with them as well.
Yeah. Well, we're going to look forward to that, okay? For those of you watching, follow Charles on Instagram to keep up with this man, because he has so many things going on. Believe me, every week I look forward to it, knowing what's Charles up to this week.
But you have something exciting coming up too, though. In June, we have your book with the Audrey Mack book club.
Yes. So we are now going to be hosting our second book club meeting, and the book this time is going to be Andre's Mack's book. I know you guys are a fellow New Yorkers, and that's going to be next Wednesday, June 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yes, I love that book. It's so cool. It's such a interesting, this is my life in wine, and also a memoir, and just and some great recommendations too.
Well, my favorite part was the first page. He's like talks about a 40. I was like, you had me right at 40. I was like, I'm interested, because I don't know about you, but I've heard so many winemakers say it takes a lot of beer to make great wine.
Oh yeah, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to mention bottles that I look up and aren't even in existence anymore. So it feels to me like wine is such a finite thing. Like I could open up a bottle and it might be the last bottle in the entire world. So sip, swirl, and savor. I learned that from you.
yeah. And enjoy it while you can, because I get questions almost every day about, I have this wine I brought from Italy. I've been saving it for 20 years. Is it good to drink? And I'm like, I don't think it might be, but the only way you can tell is to open it up, because a lot of times when they save it a little bit too long, it just turns into like something like balsamic vinegar. So
yes, I have tried library selections before, and there's some where it's like, wow, this is its peak. This is its Olympics, right? And then there's others where I'm like, this might have been tasty a year ago, but right now it is not even drinkable.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it looks like we have another question for you.
Nice.
What is your advice for novices to expand their palate? Good question.
Yeah, so I think to expand your palate, I always tell my students to find out what you like, so you have a core interest, and then slowly build out from there. So pick a few things about the wines that you really like, and then say for instance, it's spicy, fruity, and a little bit jammy. So you're like, oh, you know what? I like the spicy element. Maybe let me see what other wines would be spicy, but in a slightly different way. Or I like these jammy wines. What about the jammy quality do I like? Is it because it's like blackberry jam? Is it like plum? What kind of flavors can I explore, and what kind of wines offer those kind of flavors or experiences? And that's how you can really expand it. And I know Miranda and I were talking about one of the last chapters in my book about shopping for wine and finding the 10 and under or 12 and under section. And then if you don't spend a lot of money on wine, like $10 or $12, that's not a lot of money that you can gamble away. So try something new that you haven't heard before or tried, because if you don't like it, then you can maybe cook with it, or turn it into sangria, or that kind of poor man's sangria where they add Coca-Cola to it on the beach in Spain, that kind of stuff. So you can repurpose it for whatever reasons if you don't like it, but at least you don't spend $40, $50 trying to experiment with something and you don't like it. So
yes, that was a major question during our discussion, is can you get a good bottle of wine for $10? And 3 of us went out and we tried. We did. And I was delighted as to what I found. South African Sauv Blanc, Chilean Cab. I was delighted. I was like, wow, you really can, but you have to know vintage, varietal, label, and just understand where these wines are coming from. Because yes, I had 2 wins, but not everyone had a win.
Yeah. And then when you mentioned my friend Carrie Dykes, our store, we had a SKU section of 10 and under wines. And so, we would always drink those and just really enjoy them. And that was a great way for me to discover new grapes. Like I never knew about Carmenere 10 years ago until I tried the Chilean ones that we had for like $8.99. So yeah, and so just have a lot of fun with it and play with it. And you never know, you might be surprised. What is
a wine that's recently surprised you?
What's recently surprised me? Oh, I had it was almost like a cava blend, but it was still.
Oh.
So like Cirillo, Macabeo, and Periata, but without the bubbles. And that was really interesting. It almost felt like more of a natural wine. And I got it from one of my stores in Tribeca. And they source a lot of amazing things, and sometimes they will send me something really off the beaten path to try. And I thought that was really kind of really interesting. Something I would probably do with a little bit more like some funky food, like memelette or memele cheese, or like a pate, something that may be a little bit difficult to pair with. Or even just like, I love deviled eggs with a little bit of caviar on top. That'll be fun too.
Oh yeah! Hey everyone, come on over. Charles will host you. He's got caviar. I guess the last wine that took me by surprise was a red sparkling wine, and I was so curious to know. I was like, red? It wasn't rosé. It was actually a red sparkling wine, and on the palate, it had like the tannin of like the skin, you could taste the skin in the glass. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting, because it still had the effervescence to it as well. So while I enjoyed it, I was like, man, I'm so glad that there is so much wine out there that I could go out as much as I want, and I will always find something that I've never seen before.
Yeah, I love red sparkling wines like Lambrusco, or like they make some really amazing Shiraz from Australia, sparkling Shiraz. And I love, like sometimes, like this, I think it's going to storm here tonight, I think in New York City, but it's been really hot, like 80s and 90s. So like if you barbecue or grill and have a nice cold sparkling red wine with your barbecue or like whatever, it's so refreshing and so delicious.
Oh man. Yeah, I never thought about
food and wine.
Right. Yeah. So we actually have a game we like to play at the book club. It's called Pair That Wine, where we pair wine with food. So one of the examples was Pinot Noir, and yes, many of our wine aficionados not only drink a glass of little Pinot, but they'll put it in their marinara sauces.
Yes, I do the same. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I was, because I like to cook, especially like marinara sauce, but I've seen some recipes, in Italian recipes, and Italian like home chefs put sugar in their marinara sauce, and I can't bring myself to put sugar in my sauce. So I pour wine in there because the flavors and the acid, but also the sugar, the natural sugar that's in the wine. So to balance, you always want to balance things off. So I think the wine adds that natural sugar to the sauce without having to add, like physical sugar to it. So.
No, thank you for just literally solidifying what we already knew. Basically, we're like, wow, I didn't even know that you could do that. That is marinara sauce with Pinot Noir. At first, I was like, why wouldn't you use a cab? But you actually want the fruitiness of the Pinot Noir to appear in the marinara sauce, according to our club member. And I was like, wow, that is amazing. If you're watching this and you have a question for Charles, this is your last chance. So please drop it in the comments and we'll make sure to get it to him. Thank you. So, Charles, it has been quite a journey for you, considering you're from Wisconsin. And by the way, I love the little jokes of Wisconsin in the book. You're cheesy, and I love it. It's hilarious to read. How did you get from the land of beer and cheese and find wine? Did your love for wine start in Wisconsin, or was it later until you came to New York?
Yeah, it actually started in Wisconsin. I am the first grandson of my grandparents, Lillian and Thomas, and so my Thomas was from Tennessee, but Lillian, she was from New York, and so she also grew up very cultured. She grew up playing the piano, singing, and then she loved her lovely foods and oysters and wine and beer and rum too. But so it was. I got my love of the culture of wine from her, and then it was never really taboo for me growing up. And I again grew up a child of the '70s, so it was never really taboo for me to drink a little, have a little bit of a sample of something, at parties or at dinner sometimes with my parents or grandparents or family. So, but then it really just solidified. I mean, I think what drew me to wine before I really knew, before I got to taste a lot of wines was the culture of it and just the how it brings people together and how it seems, simple but elegant at the same time, and something to go with your meals and special occasions and things like that. So I really got wrapped up into that whole the je ne sais quoi, essence of the wine culture.
Yeah, I completely agree. Wine does bring people together over a view, over food, over chocolate and pretzels. I mean, look at us, me and you. Here we are. We're talking about wine, and we're states apart.
Yes. Yeah. And that's how that's what it should be. It should be a unifier. It shouldn't divide us. So sometimes when you have a bad experience with a person in wine, it's really frustrating. But we have to kind of really tap into our own humanity and realize that we're all humans and we're all trying to make the most out of life. And wine is one of those things that we can do that with and also bring us closer together.
Charles, I want to thank you for taking the time to meet with me and talk about wine. It has been such a pleasure having you, and I really hope this isn't the last time I see you.
Oh, of course not. I'm gonna host. I have a couple of guests, lined up for the next few months, but I'm also gonna continue to do like the pop-up sessions on IG, and then maybe in the fall I can bring you on and interview you and understand about your book club and see how you got into wine and your whole story too. So,
Charles, that sounds delightful. Yes. I'm especially looking forward to your Monday meditations because it's a nice way to insert wine into not only my Mondays, but just thinking about it, just like wine of the week. Like, what was Charles say this week? It's really something I think about constantly. And I just want to thank you again for jumping on, talking with us, answering questions from the book club. I mean, Charles, you're amazing.
Thank you. You are too. But I really appreciate this, and thanks for all the support. And I'm looking forward to next week for the Andre Mack book discussion.
Yes, I'll send you the link.
Nice.
Okay, so if you're watching at home, this has been an Entirely Wine discussion with author Charles Springfield. Please tune in to our book club next Wednesday, June 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Miranda Durr, and this has been Entirely Wine.